several witnesses.
Now that NFL Sunday Ticket is only on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can sign up in minutes. No 2-year contract or dish needed. It's never been easier to be a fan. Well, kind of. Get the mid-season price.
This is the first time I've seen this. I mean, this is like, I mean, they were told yesterday who we intended to call in the punitive damage phase that indicated we were not told anything other than Mr. Boots. And this other stuff being brought up is class damage.
Mr. Whitney or Mr. Anderson, I don't know who's handling that.
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Heese. We would like to call Saisha Mercado.
We object to Ms. Mercado. She's another person that is alleging misconduct during a child abuse investigation.
I'm not getting into other people's Chapter 37 proceeding. We're not doing that.
We would like to call Ms. Salisbury.
We would inquire what she's being called for.
Well, one of the things she's been called for is to discuss that she has had the opportunity to take the deposition of Dr. Sally Smith. And in fact, that was at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, where Sally Smith was wearing a Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital lab coat during the deposition.
They've already
Why do we need that? That's already been found by the jury.
She also, and we have an internal work product on random. She's also would testify as to the pattern practice of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital calling in Sally Smith ahead of any investigation, and the long-term damage that's done to families by this practice of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital with Sally Smith.
We object. The chilling effect already on mandatory reporting is shocking. We object to any more coming forward on behalf of abused and neglected children.
Under the law, the hospital has immunity for calling the hotline. We're not going to parade a whole bunch of people in and talking about other people's calling of the hotline and what happened because of those calls to the hotline. That's just not going to happen. So you can keep saying these people are going to be called, but I'm not allowing it. So
May I make one further point?
you may.
Except that the testimony won't be it was the result of a hotline call. It was the result of the same practice here, which is involving Sally Smith as a hospital pediatrician ahead of any hotline call, ahead of any Chapter 39 involvement.
I'd like to just make a quick record on this.
I'm saying no.
I understand, but
Okay, go ahead.
this is the problem that's infected this entire trial. Respectfully, I know Your Honor's trying to keep this out, but they've made their entire case about the involvement of Sally Smith to try to destroy the lines between what was immunity and what's not. And their whole argument about the apparent agency of Sally Smith was not for the medical care she performed at the hospital, but her role as a child abuse captain. We'd asked for this to be excluded, but we'd also noted that they're continuing to try to infect this jury with Chapter 39 issues that should have been and have been excluded. We object to these witnesses.
Well, I think I've already declined to allow that witness to be called. What's next?
Our case has been greatly simplified. I think our
There we
only
go.
witness will be Steve Heese.
Okay, so there's. Okay.
Can we have I know you want to bring him in immediately, Judge. You can have you can stay on the bench just 2 minutes because that really cuts down on a lot of our case. And I just wanted to reorganize notes for 2 minutes.
I will tell everybody I will be back in at 3:10. Tell the jury they need to use the restroom, but we're going to start at 3:10. Okay, I'll be back at 3:10.
All rise. Scores at recess.
Oh, can you believe it? Oh my God. So I'm super happy that they won. No amount of money can make up for it, but maybe now they can grieve. Because I'm sure they haven't even really grieved. I'm going to see something here real quick. Hold on, I'm looking for something. Oh God, tired. Ugh. Okay, I'm tired. I'm sorry. Oh God. Hi everybody. Hi Miss Barbara. Hi Grandma. Hi T Berry. Of course they're gonna appeal. They're also got sanctioned. Hold on a minute. I got the court papers. Hold on. Let me show you real quick. So yeah, hold on. Let me pull up these documents. Oh, here we go. So this is what happened 2 days ago, I think. Right here. Motion for sanctions. So it's Jack versus John Hopkins. And it is how many pages? 327 pages. You guys. Ain't that crazy? But so this was filed, let me look. November 5th, this was filed. So what was that, on Friday? Oh God. Yep. That's a lot to go through there. So now they say it's a second phase. And I'm not 100% what that means. Hi, Grandma. So they're bringing up the legal kidnappers, Sally Smith and Kathy. They, you know what? They got blood on their hands. That's what they got, right? Right. That woman unalived herself because of them. Okay. Oh, of course. That's a lot of money. I mean, they have tried to get away with so much. Look at all the lies. They cannot keep their lies straight. There's history at this hospital, not just with this case. This help opened up to all the others. That place should be closed down. I wonder how many people lost their children for life. Abuse of power. Yeah, just saying. What's an overreach? Oh my God. Oh, okay, they got 1 minute. They're 40 minutes behind. Just saying. She's such a pretty girl. What's going on here? Why is there no sound? What the heck is going on? Okay, they don't have sound. I'm going to go see if another channel does. Hold on. Oh, these commercials.
In light of the findings from the first round, we now move into the punitive damages phase. We're going to have opening statements from the plaintiff and then the defense. Plaintiffs?
I will see. Thank you for the past 9 weeks. We've just got a little bit more to go. So this is where we determine the amount of money necessary to change corporate behavior and make sure this kind of stuff never happens again. And what our case is based around are those series of emails and memos you saw coming down from the highest up, the general counsel, over to risk management, and then directly down to Beatty and the folks kind of on the ground level, I guess, of the interaction with Maya that brought that verdict from you. So what we want to do here now is have you focus, and we can we'll bring them up as necessary. That series of memos when you're back there, you probably already remember them, when there were directions to do these things from the highest level of the company. And that's what we're talking about when you get a question on here about specific intent. It's not just like a general screw up of the company. It's about whether the company management, for its own reasons, decided on a course of action that they had to know. And in fact, in addressing it, address the fact that it was going to harm this little girl. You know, and this is somebody who is vulnerable by herself. She cannot get out of the way. She cannot escape. So it's about protecting the most vulnerable people in that hospital and in our society. So that's why we have punitive damages in this country. It is to force a change in corporate conduct. It is to overcome the inertia of we've been doing it this way for a long time, and we got hit for a malpractice award. Let's put it over here on this part of the balance sheet, and if we're lucky, maybe the president won't hear about it. You need to make an award to make sure there's absolutely no question. Everyone in that organization, all the way up to the top, hears about it. And we're going to bring here, I think Nick's going to take him, Stephen Heese, who's the president of Chris Craft Boats. They're right over here off 15th Street next to the airport, the nation's oldest boat manufacturer, been around for 160 years. And Steve's not that old, but he's gonna come in and explain to you a little bit about managing risk and why these kind of verdicts are important. Number one. Number two, fantastically, he's also a certified public accountant and was a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So he knows how to run these numbers. So what we did was we had them produce their tax returns and their financial statements, their audited financial statements. So we know how much money they were making, and we had Steve calculate their real net worth based on the furnitures, fixtures, equipment, income, the $555 million in gross income they made one year. He's going to list all those out for you. Please take notes on the specific numbers as they come in. And what we want to do here is assign a certain percentage out of net worth, or out of revenue, or both, and that is within your province. But to effectuate what you checked, yes, you believe punitive damages are warranted, it must be enough money to absolutely make sure that the highest levels of a very, very large company hear about this and are forced to make the changes necessary to ensure that this never happens to another family. That's the mission, all right? So you'll get a verdict form, and it'll have several questions. This one, thank goodness, is only 9 pages long, so you won't have to spend reading another novel after writing a novel on each witness. And you'll go through it, and it'll have questions that ask you, based on Mr. Heese's testimony, on the various incidents that we're talking about. I don't know. It just is so insulting to call these things incidents. The damage, the injury to Maya and her family at different, same ones you saw before and checked yes to. And there are 2 types of questions. One is on clear and convincing evidence, how much per incident, just like you did before. And the second one is, importantly, about specific intent. And that is where you signal whether you understood and agree that from that highest point there, they had made up their mind to initiate a policy that led to what you saw for 9 weeks. And so you can have any evidence you want. It's all back there. You can go back and check those emails. I made a big deal about them in my opening 9 weeks ago. If you need those, check them out to confirm what we're saying is correct. But you'll see there that risk management had directed this stuff, and that's why it's so important to get into that specific intent. Because again, this is all about sending a message. The first part of your case was about compensation. Now that's over. Now what we're doing is correcting behavior, right? We're correcting behavior. And again, I keep saying these things because you all have been around this planet long enough to know how companies act, how people act. And you know that to get people to change and to get companies to change takes a lot. And so that's why these numbers are going to be big, as bigger than what you've already awarded. But they're based on a different scale, and they're based on how much the company is worth. It's $1 billion company plus, and how much it makes per year. And these are the only ways that our country has come up to find a way to change corporate behavior. So at the end of it, I'll have a chance again to talk to you about it. I'm keeping this short. You've done a fantastic job so far. We only need you a little bit more to do the right thing here on behalf of now you're talking not only for the Kowalskis, but for everyone. Okay? That's all I got to say right now.
Mr. Shapiro.
Good afternoon. No surprise, obviously, my team's very disappointed by the verdict. But I do have a chance to talk to you one last time about what they're asking you to do. I represent a nonprofit organization that's a children's hospital. You're going to hear testimony that every dollar that is awarded in this phase is a dollar that we don't have to spend on medical care in this community. We're going to learn a couple things. And it's simply this. The Kowalskis, so your verdict, have been, so the punitive damages, so you know, are only for, I think you signed the verdict form, and I know you spent a lot of time with it. They're for the false imprisonment and the batteries, right? They're not for medical care. By my math, you've now awarded $57 million to the Kowalskis for the photographs and the false imprisonment, and total compensation for the Kowalskis is approaching $250 million. I would suggest to you that's fair compensation, more than fair compensation. In terms of what they're asking you to, so these punitive damages are to punish and deter, right? So a couple things to keep in mind. Obviously, I don't have a chance to just sit down with you and find out what drove this specific anger. But if it was Kathy Beatty, she no longer works at the hospital. So that's not something that you have to keep in mind. Do we need to punish or deter for anything she did? If you found that there was something that she did that was improper, I would suggest to you that's not something that you need to send a message on. I also remind you, in terms of if this is corporate misconduct or something you heard from Mr. Corcoran that you thought All Children's was doing improperly, I would remind you Mr. Corcoran did say that after whatever surveys came down that he was concerned about, that All Children's did an excellent job of correcting them, and now there is an open culture of communication that can reach the highest levels, so that we wouldn't need to see any type of message coming from this jury to correct any future conduct, because all of that's been corrected. But again, we would suggest to you that on the false imprisonment, just keep this in mind, and I don't want to re-argue the evidence because obviously you disagreed with me. But in terms of punishing, deterring, I thought I did what I could to let you know that the reason why All Children's back in that first week where you've awarded a lot of money for what they call the false imprisonment, just that 1 week before the abuse hotline led to the shelter, that All Children's did that because they were concerned for Maya. And I do fear that a verdict on punitive damages to punish and deter healthcare providers for speaking out when they see children that they think are susceptible to leaving and being put into a ketamine coma that they believe is dangerous, to being taken and put in intrathecal clonidine pumps that they think could lead to patient death, that sending a message for punitive damage is really going to create a silencing effect at my hospital.
Workout isn't about mirrors, mood lights, or followers. It's about what you did with your time. It's about how you feel when it's finished and who supported you along the way. F45 is Groove Fitness with the effectiveness and attention of a personal trainer. We are world-class workouts designed so that anyone can participate.
Silence healthcare providers when they have a genuine concern is going to be tragic. I look forward to talking to you again once we're done this process. Thank you.
Plaintiffs, call your first witness.
We'd like to begin, Your Honor, if we could, by publishing several exhibits of videos.
You may. So long as they're in evidence.
They are, Your Honor. We will begin by publishing 2832 Alpha, previously admitted. This is a video of a town hall meeting at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, concurrent with the immediate jeopardy. You can play it.
So let's talk about the survey results. So we did have the 12 surveyors, as you all know, on site. You all, for those who were here, had the opportunity to experience that. There's a couple things I want you to understand. Is when they were here, you may have heard me say this before, they were surveying us on a federal level, which is around the conditions of participation for CMS, and they were also surveying us at a state level. So this was both a survey for federal regs and also state regs. So let's first of all talk about what immediate jeopardy means, because that's the word that I think has gotten everybody's attention. And just so you all know, this is not my first time to be in an organization where there has been an immediate.
That video excerpt. We'd next like to play 2832 Bravo, previously admitted, further from the town hall meeting.
The jeopardy that you can receive is something that's called around culpability. And that really is around the issue that leadership knew that there were quality and safety issues and did not elevate it in appropriate ways to the board. And so because of that, there were enough what's called conditions of participations noted that they felt it was important to give us an immediate jeopardy. So I wanted you all to understand that the immediate jeopardy really is about system process issues of the way that quality and safety issues are driven to the board so that the board can govern and act like a board on behalf of All Children's Hospital.
2832 Charlie, another clip from the town hall meeting.
Was about information flow, data collection, how you really look at quality and safety, and how that gets fed back up to the board. So that is what immediate jeopardy means.
And to conclude the video clips from the town hall meeting, 2832 Delta. If you could turn
It's a
this up.
cultural issue.
If Your Honor has the ability to increase it from the bench, that's as loud as I can get it.
That's as loud as I can do it. I don't know if we'll get any feedback, but there you go.
It's a cultural issue. I think that's what the one thing that has struck me the most is that while on site, the stories that I've heard and the fear of retaliation and retribution if you speak up and speak out. And people have real stories that they've shared with me. And I have that.
Next, Your Honor, we would call Stephen Heese to the stand.
Stand here, face the clerk, and raise your right hand.
I solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, we're gonna come this way. You're gonna have to see you not stand there.
The police's court.
Next.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here on short notice. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Stephen Heese.
And would you please introduce yourself to the jury by way of your current position and profession?
Sure. I'm the president of the Chris Craft Boat Company in Sarasota, Florida. It's America's oldest boat builder, been in business for 150 years.
Thank you, Mr. Heese. I'd like to discuss for a few minutes your background, training, and experience. The jury knows the drill by now. But would you please give us the benefit of your formal education in business?
Formal education. I have an undergraduate degree. I grew up in Tampa. I went to Jesuit High School, went to Tulane University in New Orleans, got a degree in accounting, worked for several years at Price Waterhouse, went to business school at Harvard University in Boston. And that's the limit of my education.
Sure. Did I understand? And it was a master's of business administration, an MBA from Harvard Business School?
Yes, with a concentration in finance.
Understood. And that was very brief. I'm going to explore it a little bit more. You mentioned, if I heard you correctly, that you worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers between undergrad and business school. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What was your role and function at PricewaterhouseCoopers?
Started off in the audit department And then after I became certified as a certified public accountant, I switched to the management consulting department and installed enterprise resource planning software for the next following 3 years.
And how long were you at PricewaterhouseCoopers again?
Almost 5 years in total.
In those 5 years, did you have an opportunity to work within the healthcare industry?
Had audits of healthcare providers, hospitals.
Anyone that the jury might know?
Tampa General Hospital.
All right. And so you audited and analyzed the finances of Tampa General Hospital during those years?
That's correct.
And so you have familiarity with the finances of large hospital systems, is that correct?
Yes. I also grew up in a medical family. My mom was a midwife. My sister's a nurse. I have aunts and uncles that are nurses and doctors. My daughter is a pediatric ICU nurse at Children's Hospital in New York City.
And we don't need, what took you from Harvard Business School to president of Chris Craft?
I have, since business school, I've made my living buying broken companies, fixing them, and selling them, particularly in the power sports business.
And so am I correct in understanding that Chris Craft, when you purchased it, perhaps was somewhat broken?
It was at a bankruptcy auction, completely shut down in 2000. It had gone bankrupt.
And you've been president of Chris Craft for how long now?
23 years.
And under your management, has Chris Craft been successful?
Yes.
How many employees do you have at Chris Craft?
About 400.
And through your management of Chris Craft, have you had to purchase and manage the healthcare benefits and systems of Chris Craft?
Every year.
If you could, let me ask you an open-ended question. Is risk management a concept that you learned at Harvard Business School?
I object to Relevance Foundation and relevance to this proceeding.
Overruled.
You can answer. Risk management, the concept of risk management. Would you please explain what that means, whether you're talking about the healthcare industry or you're talking about the marine products industry?
Sure. In any business, there's risk. Risk is something that every business has to manage. Many risks cannot be eliminated. You know, in the marine industry specifically, boats have propellers, they've got fuel tanks, they've got carbon monoxide, they're used in the water. People are having fun when they're using them, often eating and drinking. These are genuine risks that a manufacturer has to understand and manage and do their utmost to mitigate.
What role does culture play within an entity, whether it's Tampa General Hospital or Chris Craft, in terms of the risk management attitude of the employees and leadership?
Objection again, foundation.
Overruled.
Could you ask the question again?
Sure. What role does culture play in terms of whether you're looking at an entity like Tampa General Hospital or Chris Craft, as culture interacts with risk management?
Again, foundation speculation.
Overruled. You can answer.
It plays an important role, but not the only role. But for sure, the attitude of the employees is reflecting on the attitude of management and management's approach to managing the risk. So, if management is seen to be insisting that people are certified, insisting, with the standards that govern their activities, and if there's procedures in place to deal with exceptions, employees know that the employer is seeking to do the right thing at all times, top to bottom, and that culture gets created where those risks can be managed and mitigated.
Having taken over Chris Craft when it was in the midst of bankruptcy, did you have a challenge in creating the proper culture within Chris Craft to take it from bankruptcy to success?
I've been committed to standards and training of employees. And so those are the foundations: systems, training, ideally outside certifications and training, written procedures that are followed and reviewed. These are the fundamental building blocks of risk management.
Throughout your career, whether it was at the beginning of PricewaterhouseCoopers or in your past 20-something years with Chris Kraft, have you seen instances where the culture was such that it allowed retaliation and retribution for employees that spoke up about doing the right thing?
Objection, foundation, scope.
Overall,
I have certainly seen that.
And how important is it to stamp out that type of culture that would allow such actions by leadership?
If the company's going to sustain itself, it's really important, critically important.
All right. Now, I'd like to discuss with you your report, which I believe you might have a copy there, and let's just keep it there for now. You'll have it as a reference. If you need to refresh your recollection, let me know. But for now, let's just try to do this from memory and your general.
Okay.
Have you had an opportunity? Well, as part of your presidency of Chris Kraft, do you monitor the industry for punitive damages awards?
I need to approach on this one.
approach.
Our job keeps getting easier. Let's turn to what has been marked as 2279H as in hotel. If we could publish this, please. And the jury will have this document with them when they're deliberating regarding punitive damages. The jury will also have 2279 Juliet, as in J or Juliet, which is the next year's tax return. But let me start here because, first of all, would you explain to me and the jury what we're looking at here?
The first page is irrelevant.
What document is this?
Oh, it's a tax return for the 12 months ended June 30th, 2021. And it gets filed on the previous year because it's in the middle of the year. The new tax form isn't done, so they use the tax form for the previous tax year.
And informing your opinions, is this the document that you relied upon?
Yes.
And so it says 2020 in the top right corner.
Yes.
But if I understood your testimony, you're telling this jury that Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital files their taxes mid-year, so they would have filed in mid-year 2021, even though this says 2020.
Correct. So if you look in the middle of the page at the top, it says for the calendar year 2020 or the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020 and ending June 30, 2021. And so that the forms all follow that same time frame.
All right. Now, focusing there on page 1, would you please tell the jury what total revenue was for Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021?
Yes, so you have to go to page 9. I don't know if you all have this in front of you.
Like we can get to whatever page you need, so you direct us.
So page 9, and the pages are in the upper right-hand corner. Total revenue for that year was $555 million. And that's in the bottom of column A at the bottom of page 9.
It says page 7. There you go. I'm sorry. These documents are not familiar to us. They're familiar to you. So if you could re-express what you just said. So now the
Sure, the
jury has
beginning
it.
of this is just checklists and required disclosures by the IRS.
Mhm.
But the financial statements start on page 9 with the page number in the upper right-hand corner where it says page 9.
And you should have that in front of you on your screen. And
Yes.
the jury has the same. So if you would direct us to the figure that you were just discussing.
Column A, which the columns are labeled at the top, it says total revenue. And you go to the bottom of column A, and it's highlighted in yellow on what I'm looking at on the screen, $555 million.
So I imagine the jury knows the answer to this question, but for the record, what is total revenue as expressed here? What is that?
Billings, invoices, charges that the hospital sent out to its patients and other people that it provided services to.
All right. So you're aware that we're here to discuss a punitive damage award if the jury deems that appropriate here. Direct me through the document as to what figures and categories you would look to in determining what resources are available to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital to pay any punitive damages award that the jury deems appropriate.
So it starts on page 9, but if you go to page 11, it's the balance sheet of the entity. It's a nonprofit, which means that it seeks not to make a profit. Any extra cash that's left at the end of the year gets invested in the company the following year.
As of, you can stop, scroll, please. And if you could scroll up so we can see the page number at the top so the jury's oriented, they'll have that back there with them. So look at page 11.
Yep. So
cash, non-interest bearing.
So that's $62 million that they have in there. Cash, non-interest bearing, that's typically in a checking account. Checking accounts don't pay interest. So that's at the end, it's column B actually, 46 million at the end of the year. The $62 million number is the start of the year. Column B is the end of the year, the $46 million.
So the jury can understand that at the end of the fiscal year 2021, June 30th, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital effectively had $46 million in its checking account.
That's on line 1, yes. But really to get a clear picture, you need to go down to line 11 and add the balance of line 11, which is $518 million, which is publicly traded securities. So
Okay.
Yeah,
please.
Those are stocks and bonds that you could decide today that you wanted cash, tell your broker to sell them, and you'd have cash tomorrow.
So that $518 million figure here, it would not be difficult for Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital to liquidate those publicly traded securities.
And write a check 2 days from now.
They're traded on public markets.
It says publicly traded securities. People don't usually lie on their tax returns, so I would say yes, that is publicly traded securities that could be sold.
And if we do, just focusing on line 1 and line 11, if you're good at mental math, imagine you are. What are we talking about here for resources available to pay a punitive damages award? So far?
$570 million roughly.
What other lines or figures would you look to on this form to determine if there's any other assets?
Right below there, you have almost 6 million in other securities. And then line 13, you got another 24 million in program related investments. I don't know what those are, but there are certainly investments and there's money sitting there.
By the way, were you available to attend a deposition of the CFO of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital this afternoon at 1 o'clock?
I was available.
And given what's happened here today, you didn't have the chance to hear that testimony, did you?
No.
So you haven't had an opportunity to explore as we sit here at 3:45 what this program-related investments are?
No.
All right. So considering those, am I correct that if you were at $570 million more or less before we add another $30 million, we're now at roughly $600 million?
Correct.
Are there any other figures that you would look to on this form to determine what Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital would have available to pay a punitive damages award?
If you go further down the balance sheet, there's fixed assets, property, plant, and equipment, and real estate. So if you,
And you said further down, are we looking at a different page now?
let's have a look.
Sure.
I'm sorry, line 10A,
On the same page?
10A and 10B.
All right.
So there's 394 million roughly in property, plant, and equipment. And that number is purchase price less depreciation. So it's what was paid for it originally, less depreciation each year that goes by. Land doesn't get depreciated. So it was bought a long time ago. So I'm guessing it's substantially undervalued compared to these numbers.
And if I'm correct, the depreciation there is a tax concept, right?
Correct.
But if the purchase price here was, it looks to be $650 million for the real estate.
Land buildings and equipment.
$650 million.
Correct.
And so the figure there in the right column, $394 million, is after depreciation, but that doesn't reflect the true depreciation in value. That reflects how it's held on the books after depreciation is accounted for.
Correct.
So you made a statement that the 650 million, the 394 significantly underestimates the real estate assets available to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, right?
Typically, yes.
And is it your opinion that if the purchase price was $652 million, that Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital would have real estate assets in excess of that amount given inflation, appreciation, et cetera?
Yes.
Calls for speculation.
Overall,
And again,
I think everyone knows what's happened to Florida real estate over the last 10, 20, 30
Sure.
years.
Sure. You say you're from Tampa.
Yes.
How long has All Children's Hospital, if you know, been in that location, in those buildings on that campus?
Since I was a child.
Does that support your opinion that these numbers here are significantly undervaluing what the worth of those real estate assets is?
Yes.
Okay, but we can go with the numbers that we have here. So before we were at $600 million in cash and cash equivalents, am I correct?
Yes.
And here, although it's significantly underestimated, we have another $400 million in real estate assets held as it's held in the books.
Land, building, and equipment. Yes.
And so we're at approximately $1 billion now
Yes.
that Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital will have available to pay any punitive damages award.
Yes.
May I have a moment?
man,
Thank you.
I'm also guessing that the hospital has insurance typically.
Well, I knew from this trial, that's unbelievable.
You don't know.
Sidebar. So anyways, trying to, hold on, I gotta mute. Oh my God, I won't mute and I got a cough. Oh my God. All right. Now, they should be punished. And B, I don't know why
Members of the jury,
I didn't unsubscribe from you.
that last comment you heard about insurance, the first thing you need
YouTube
to do
did
is
it.
totally disregard it. The second thing, I'm gonna tell you that under Florida law, insurance does not address or cover punitive damages. So there is no insurance for punitive damages. So you are to totally ignore the comment made about insurance coverage. Mr. Whitney, you may continue.
Are there any other figures on the balance sheet here that we haven't focused on that would inform your opinion as to the assets available to Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital to pay a punitive damages award?
No.
Having reviewed the balance sheet here with the jury, page 11 of 2279 hotel, have all of your opinions been based upon your background, training, and experience and offered to a reasonable degree of accounting and management probability?
Yes.
And ultimately, what is your opinion as to the resources or assets available to pay any punitive damages award in terms of the numbers we've discussed on this sheet?
At least $1.2 billion.
When you say $1.2 billion.
Correct.
No further questions this time.
Mr. Shapiro.
Sure, thank you. Mr. Heese, you've known Mr. Anderson for what, 20 years?
Yes.
You guys were hugging and high-fiving in the hallway, weren't you?
What do you mean?
I saw you hugging and high-fiving Mr. Anderson in the hallway. Were
I
you not?
high-fived him.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about your opinions. This is a nonprofit charitable organization, true?
It filed a tax return on a nonprofit tax return, so I'm assuming it's a nonprofit entity.
Yeah, this is a children's hospital. That's my point. You know this is a nonprofit 501c3, true?
Yes.
All the money, and I think you said this in fairness to you, all the money that's left over at the end of the year gets reinvested back into the community, true?
I don't know about the community, the entity.
Right. And do you know what the charitable mission of All Children's Hospital is?
I am not aware of that.
It's right there on the tax return. Before you testified, you didn't look?
You can draw my attention to
Sure.
that.
2279H002. We can put it up on the screen. See summary part 1?
Yep.
What does it say?
I was looking at part 3. Part 1, which page you on?
Please briefly describe the organization's mission and most significant activities. Am I reading this right? Provide leadership in child health through treatment, education, advocacy, and research. Is that right?
Strive to provide the highest quality of care to improve the health of the entire community through innovation, collaboration, service excellence.
Well, let's talk about innovation. Are you aware that All Children's has a training program to train the next generation of doctors and residents?
No,
You've lived in the community for 20 years. You had no idea there was a residency training program?
did not know that.
Did you know that All Children's receives grants to do research?
Yes.
Okay. Let me ask you a little bit about, you talked about revenue of $555,256,053. There's expenses, aren't there?
Yes.
What were they?
If you look at the following page, the total is there. $519 million.
And that was with CARES Act money, true, right?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, you can look at the prior year, they actually spent more than they took in, true?
The prior is not on the page.
All right. Let me ask you this. Whatever All Children's doesn't spend as a 501c3, you know they have to they reinvest it back in the company, right?
Not necessarily. They've got an awful lot of cash on their balance sheet.
Well, let's talk about that. Are you aware of what their strategic plan is?
I'm not party privy to that.
Okay. Do you know what All Children's plans on doing with the cash in the balance sheet in terms of helping this community facilitate patient care? Do you know?
Given that the cash balance is fairly stable from year to year, I would say they invest it.
When you talk about property, you mean the property where the hospital sits, right?
The line is called property, plant, and equipment, so that would include the land that the hospital sits on, yes.
So if they sold the land where the hospital sits on, there's no more hospital.
Now, you could do a sale and lease back.
Okay, and if they sold property that they may hold in Sarasota, Florida, where they were going to build a clinic to, for example, take care of children dying from cancer to pay this award, that would hurt the community, wouldn't it?
Objection.
Overruled.
If you ask the question again,
Yeah, if when you talk about selling property, this isn't beachfront property. If they're selling property in Sarasota County, where they're trying to build an outreach center to help treat children who have cancer so they don't have to make the drive to All Children's, that would be the type of property they would have to sell, right, Mr. Heese?
what I'm suggesting is they don't have to sell it to a third party who's going to put up a 7-Eleven. They could sell it and do a lease back, continue with their strategic plan and pay rent if they needed to. But I'm also suggesting that I don't think they need to because they're sitting on an awful lot of cash.
That cash is needed because if you don't have an adequate balance sheet, you can't borrow money, can you?
It depends on what assets you have. There's all different ways to borrow money.
There are credit rating agencies that look at the hospital's financial stability, and if they're not properly financed, they can't get money. True?
If the balance sheet is in poor condition of a company, it will have a hard time borrowing money.
Right, because if there's 200, 300, 400 million dollars going out the door, that's going to have an adverse effect on the balance sheet of a company and their ability to continue to do business. True?
No, it depends on the cash balance that's there at the beginning and what gets paid out.
Well, let me ask you, you said operations include equipment. That would include ventilators, keeping neonatal children alive. True? That's equipment.
It would include all the equipment the hospital owns.
That would include the MRI machine that can detect early brain cancer and potentially save lives. True?
Equipment typically goes down in value. Land and buildings go up in value.
Right, and that's why they have to do constant upgrades on equipment with the cash they have, so they don't have outdated technology. True?
Correct.
Do you sit on a board and decide when, well, let me ask you this. As president of a company, you have to decide where to allocate your dollars, right? Money's fungible. Money, if you lose money in one area, you don't have it to spend somewhere else. Do you?
Correct.
And have you ever had to sit on the board of a children's hospital to decide whether to upgrade the MRI machines that are detecting cancer versus the ventilators that are keeping neonatal children alive? Have you ever had to do that?
No.
Have you ever had to make the decision as to which outreach clinics you were going to fund, whether you're going to continue to expand in Sarasota versus Pasco County versus Polk County? Have you ever had to do that?
No.
When you took over your company, you said it was in bankruptcy.
Yes.
Did you make changes to it?
Yes.
And as a result of the changes, did the company improve?
Yes.
One moment here. That's all I have for you.
Any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor. Mr. Heath, were you deposed yesterday afternoon?
Yes.
How long did that deposition last?
15 minutes.
Were you asked any of the questions you were just asked here challenging you in that way?
No.
Am I correct that the purpose of the deposition yesterday was just to find out what document you'd be relying upon?
That was the main, seemed to be the main question that got asked.
And you told them yesterday you'd be relying upon the 2021 tax form we looked at today, right?
Correct.
Hold on a second. I have on Zoom and now Miss Angela Green and others.
Well,
So
Put her away, Rick.
I'm going to do that. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Thank you. I don't know if I got the answer out there that I wanted, but you testified yesterday, consistent with today's testimony, that your opinions would be based on that tax return form.
Correct.
Since the residency training program was brought up, are you aware of the role that Dr. Sally Smith has played in this case?
Yes.
Objection, speculation, relevance, foundation.
Sustained.
You mentioned a concept there that was not explored that I'd like to explore a little bit, sale leaseback. Would you please explain, let's just be specific here. If we're talking about real estate assets, what is a sale leaseback?
It's a huge industry in the United States. I get a phone call practically every week from representatives of investor groups that like to buy real estate and then lease it back to the owner. It's a way to raise liquidity if it's needed.
So it's
Investors love it.
Is it a way to unlock value out of your real estate assets?
Correct. Get liquidity out of real estate.
And Chris Craft, right? You received these offers?
Yes.
And so if you were to enter into a sale leaseback arrangement, can you explain the mechanics of that a little bit more in detail for the jury?
Sure. The land gets valued by an independent appraiser. There's an advance rate against that value. So say the land value is $1 million. They'll loan you 80% of it. They'll pay you 80% of it and lease it back to you, giving a return to the person that buys the land and buildings.
And then you effectively pay rent.
Correct.
And so using those figures we discussed a moment ago, did we not, an underestimate in terms of plants, property, equipment of $400 million?
Yes.
And you believe that to be significantly undervalued?
Yes.
But if you're able to unlock 80% of the value of those real estate assets, considering that it's $400 million, what are we talking about? What number?
Easily 75% of that number.
And so that'd be $300 million?
Yeah.
And if the hospital, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospitals, enter into an arrangement like this, they'd be able to continue operations in their hospital as it exists.
Correct.
You wouldn't be shutting down a children's hospital by doing it.
Objection, foundation, speculation.
Overruled.
You wouldn't be shutting down a children's hospital by entering into a sale leaseback arrangement, would you?
It would depend on the amount of the punitive damages, but if the sale leaseback paid the punitive damages, you could have all your cash on your balance sheet and keep it there.
And so if you consider the cash on the balance sheet of $600 million and sale leaseback income, $300 million, what figure are we talking about that would be available to pay punitive damages for?
Well, in total, you'd add the cash and the value of the real estate.
And 600 plus 300 million.
900 million.
And again, are all your opinions to a reasonable management and accounting probability?
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So just so we're super clear on this leaseback agreement that you think the hospital should enter into, that means they're selling the property.
I didn't suggest that. I said it's an option that could be considered.
Right. And
I'm not recommending that.
But if a hospital, if All Children's Hospital had to enter in a leaseback, that means they're selling a property that they own that they're not currently paying rent on to somebody that's going to charge them rent, right?
But it allows them to keep their cash investments, which you explained were badly needed.
Yeah, well, that's going to decrease their balance sheet in terms of what they have to have going out the door for rent. True?
Correct.
And so, for example, if they had to sell $300 million worth of property and lease it back at say 8%, that's gonna cost the company what? How's your math? What, 24 million?
Yeah.
What's the cost of an MRI machine that could survey pediatric cancer and save children's lives? Do
Objection,
you know?
foundation, relevance, speculation.
Sustained.
Do you know what the cost? Do you know what that 24 million could go to buy? How many lives could be saved by that?
Same objection.
Sustained.
No more questions.
Any follow-up questions?
No, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, do any of you have any questions? Jury has some questions, sir. Where do punitive damages go?
What do you mean, where they go?
Do you know who gets them? If you know.
They're paid to the plaintiff.
Next question. Mr. Shapiro mentioned Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital needs its balances, or that its balances are needed for upgrades, which brings me to ask this. I believe you said Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital runs about 1.2 billion plus or minus on their tax balance sheets from year to year. Is that correct?
You need to be more specific than that. So if you look at line by line, we only had through 2020 available when I did my analysis. Since that time, like as recently as yesterday, I saw tax returns that were further 2022, for instance. The cash balances stayed fairly stable across all the years. So the argument that Mr. Shapiro made about they need that money to spend, there's no evidence of that in the tax returns. I'm not disputing the fact that he believes that, but the tax returns that I looked at, the cash balances are fairly stable from year to year.
Well, then the next question is, I would believe that Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital has every year been making constant equipment upgrades, and with constant upgrades still keeps a floating 1.2 plus or minus billion.
Being an NFL fan is the greatest. Unless your home team doesn't match your hometown.
That if it's the net number of what goes in and what comes out. So if you add the numbers up, it's fairly stable from year to year. So if they're investing in new equipment, which I can imagine they are, every business does, they're taking in sufficient cash to cover those costs.
Okay, thank you. Plaintiffs, any further questions?
Nothing further from the plaintiff for this witness.
Defense.
No, thank you.
Okay, was there any further from the jury?
Actually, I do have one more question.
Come on down, Mr. Shapiro.
Actually, I'll withdraw. That's fine. So,
May this witness be excused?
yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. And your next witness, please.
For 1 second, Session.
Sure. Plaintiffs, are you going to have any other witnesses?
I don't believe so.
So is the plaintiff arrests its punitive damage case?
Yes.
Okay, members of the jury, we're going to take a few minutes break. You may not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You may not do any investigation. You may not receive any information. Let's go ahead and just take your break, and then we'll call you back and try to hopefully within 10 minutes or so.
All rise. Jurors exit.
You guys even know what's going on? I don't.
Okay, please be seated, everybody. Okay, defense, or the jury's out of our presence. Defense, do you have your exhibits that we can talk about?
Oh yeah, they're pouting. That's defense.
Okay, so we're not going to do any additional exhibits.
That's defense.
And did you get those additional clips from the plaintiffs?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mhm.
They were sent, Your Honor.
They were sent.
I gave Mr. Cottrell the files on their hard drives.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break. So if you want to look at those extra clips, you can do that.
Yes, sit down, old man.
I don't think I have a hard copy of the instruction of the verdict form. I just did the final change on that.
What I'll do is when I come back, I'll bring a copy, and if you can fly spec it. And I think we emailed it, so Mr. Elegant probably would have the ability to look at it as well.
Your Honor, I'm not sure I've seen the one with that one change we made on the.
There he goes again.
I don't think that's coming.
I did not, you're right, I did not resend it after the one change that you made. So in a couple moments, I will resend that, and then I'll bring Mr. Alton for a paper copy when I come back from break.
Thanks very much.
Okay, anything else before we go on break? Okay, let's try to keep this to no more than 10 minutes, folks.
All rise. Go to recess.
Okay, this is okay. I got an opinion here. So I see what defense is doing. You know, that one guy, that voice that bothers me, you know, that attorney for defense, you know, just saying, you know, I'm not saying he's a bad man. I'm just, you know, what I'm observing here. Now, what he's trying to say to the jury, because they just went through the tax things, he kept saying the children with cancer, the children with cancer. And he kept using that. However, in the beginning, before this man, when he, you know, when they say their, you know, what is it called, you guys? Their statement when they first start. You guys, I'm not feeling good today. But anyways, he talked about how much money Maya got. Okay. He goes, that's well more than enough. Did you hear that? Did you hear him say that? I did. Yeah. But then after he interviewed this witness or whatever on the stand, he kept kids with cancer, kids with cancer, which is a horrible thing. He's like really pulling at people's heartstrings, kind of like Maya's story and all the others, you know, that have suffered from the hands of that place. Yeah. So anyway, it's just something I caught. He had to put that little remark it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to clip it. I'm going to post it. His little cocky mouth. He's sitting there running his. Never mind. I was almost going to say bad word, Grandma. It's one of those days. Is Miss Barbara still here? Did you notice that? Okay, I wasn't the only one. Good. I'm going to clip it when this is over. Yep. So anyways, Miss Barbara, I was so happy to look at what I looked at last night, and I'm going to be doing a live. I want to try to do it tonight. And I'm going to showcase, Caleb is going to be the spotlight tonight. And Bobby, and there's a reason why. Okay? Just thought I'd give you the heads up. It's gonna be amazing, because you know what? I'm gonna do a notification. You know how we do that, Miss Barbara? And I'm gonna make sure he knows I'm live, because I got some questions for him. Yep. I just got a few questions. Well, you know they watch. Who else will be calling them out? You know? I will. I need that. I think I got that. Never mind. I was going to ask you for a clip. But I think I still got it. Never mind. Yeah, and I think Bobby was with Caleb on a couple of those cases because they're the same. I found out some interesting stuff too. And you know what? In my state, we get everything for free. Don't say my state, Miss Barbara, but we don't have to pay for none of that. None of it. No documents. It's all free because the governor made it that way. Okay? To be very, very transparent. And believe me, they are very. But I didn't want to pay for the documents. So I'm kind of I'm looking, okay, going by the court minutes, because some of them, they won't give you any kind of information, but they got the tiny section where it says the court minutes. But, okay, is it one case? One case is not available to look at. I don't know why. Okay, their time is up. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Well, Miss Barbara, that was awfully, awfully weird. Remember? I said that don't make any sense. All of a sudden, it's gone. Come on, something's up. And there is something going on there, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why. It's just a feeling, alleged. I was going to do it last night, but my daughter called me, like at 10:10. Yeah, they took a 10-minute break because I think defense is whining like normal. They need to go take naps. Did you hear what that attorney was saying to the judge? Right, I know. Yep. Oh yeah, that old man is. He needs a nap. I'm not hating on him. I'm sure he's a good man in real life, but I suppose he's doing his job though. I think Dr. Sally and Beatty and Dr. Sanchez should all do some time in prison. I want them to be put in a cell against their will. Yeah. Yep. I'd like to see that. And see how they'd like it to be taken against their will. What they did is unforgivable to me. They will pay for that karma. The icky karma. Yeah. Yeah, but they are doing their job. I totally agree with that, but they've been caught in a lot of lies. That's why there's 327 page motion for sanctions. How crazy is that? And there's more to come. Oh, okay. They can just never be on time. You know what, you guys? I could not be an attorney. I could not be a judge. Wanna know why? Because I'm too biased. I could be on a jury, though. Could you imagine that if I was on a jury? Ooh, I'd want to be the poor person. No, they wouldn't pick me. They would strike me. Nope, strike that bitch. Strike her. Yeah, I just got done eating, trying to feel better. I got a lot going on. What's new? You know? You're getting juried? Oh my God, you are so lucky. Oh yeah, I've done I've showed like 4 or 5 other families. I dug into this place. Yummy. I'm gonna mute.
And Mr. Altenberg, I've got 4 copies of the verdict form and the instructions coming. Where'd all the plaintiff's lawyers go?
Your Honor, do you see, Mr.
Well, I have, all the plaintiff's lawyers are out, so let's just
Oh,
wait.
I was just asking if my witness.
In the waiting room, and I have a Miss Rogers, a Sharon Rogers.
Yes, sir. We were told just before this started that they would not be calling Ms. Green and that they would only be calling Ms. Rogers.
Well, I have both of them in the waiting room, so
Ms. Rogers will be first.
so you're calling both?
I believe Mr. Hunter doesn't intend to call Ms. Green.
I'm sorry, does or does not?
Yes, does.
Okay. And so everyone now has a copy of the jury instructions and verdict form, and I'm trusting that both plaintiffs and defense will fly spec it again while we are in the defense case. Are we ready to bring the jury back in?
Yes, Your Honor.
From the plaintiffs, are you ready?
We're ready.
We don't have the jury here. Do you need to approach or can we just talk?
I'm just talking, we were given a number of audio, audio
Clips, files.
clips, files, whatever they're. We still haven't been given the video files that we saw the other night. I think you're right. We got, what we got was copies of what Your Honor admitted or ruled upon, and then we got audio, not video. So I think I can proceed with what I've got, Judge, but it's not.
Well, how about this? Can I have everyone's attention from the plaintiff's team?
My apologies.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we start with a defense case? In the interim, the plaintiffs will re-give the video files, and before you rest, Mr. Hunter, I'll send the jury out, and then you can go look at the video files. Does that work?
I guess so, Judge.
Or do you want to?
I'm just concerned that we're going to get blamed for delaying this, given the hour and given the day and where we are.
Okay, well, then if you want to do it now, we can do it now, and I'll keep the jury, and the jury won't know, so.
I don't have any objection to what Your Honor's doing, but I do want the opportunity to look at these things and if indicated to put a clip or three in. And we've got a problem with the prejudice that is being inflicted on us, given our position in presenting these things and the potential perception that a jury that's already not particularly pleased with us is going to blame us for keeping them later.
Well, you tell me, do you want to do it now, or do you want me to send the jury out after you have finished with your two witnesses?
I think the two witnesses, Judge, we may make the decision that we'll go without. But
And Mr. Altenberg's trying to get near you.
I need to see.
Can you believe it?
Did
Look
whatever
at that
Mr.
old
Altenberg
man.
just talk to you, change your.
He was asking, and I thought of it. He was asking if I could step out and watch it while Mr. Shapiro is putting the next witness on. And what I told him was that I wanted to see what the next witness said so as not to have overlap with the second witness we're calling.
Understood.
Yeah. We had requested to review the 2 boxes of additional materials that were not provided to us at the deposition of Ms. Green. We have yet to receive those.
I thought those were being brought this morning.
They were available here at the courthouse about the time the jury knocked.
So they're still available?
I believe so.
So someone can go out and look at them in the hallway or in one of the witness rooms?
We will do so. If we can know where they are, please.
Where are those
They're
boxes?
in one of the mediation rooms. Judge.
Do one of the paralegals, can you help
Yes.
the plaintiffs? And then from the plaintiff's side, let's talk about those extra clips. Are we getting those in a position so that I need the plaintiff's attention? Are we getting those clips that were not played here in court? They need to see them. So
I understand. It was nothing intentional. We had some confusion. We are providing the full video clips that we have there.
And how are we doing that?
Mr. Reyes is preparing a thumb drive with the full video clips we received.
I could have had it all ready for myself.
Are we ready to bring in the jury at this point?
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiffs?
Yes, Your Honor.
Let's bring in the jury. Members of the jury, I want to confirm while you were away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that correct? No one from the media approached you. Is that correct? Or actually, no one, whether they're from the media or elsewise, no one approached you. Is that correct? And you haven't seen any media clips. Is that correct? Defense, your case.
Yes, we call Sharon Rogers. She's by video.
Oh, and what state is she in?
She's here in Florida.
Okay. There we go. We'll add the spotlight. And Mr. Cottrell, are you going to be able to? There we go. Good afternoon, Ms. Rogers. This is Judge Carroll. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, Ms. Rogers. And are you currently within the state of Florida as you sit wherever you're seated?
I am not in the state of Florida.
You're outside the state of Florida?
I am, yes.
Okay. Let me give you an instruction. I am a judge in the state of Florida, so my powers, if you will, only go to the border of the state of Florida. Now, you may allow me to administer the oath to you, but if you allow me to do that, you're going to agree that any sort of action for perjury would actually occur here in Sarasota County, Florida, because that's where you're actually testifying, even though you're not physically here now with us. So understanding that and agreeing to personal jurisdiction here in Sarasota County, Florida, do you agree I can administer the oath to you?
Yes, I agree.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give is the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead and lower your hand. Thank you very much. And I have Mr. Shapiro in front of me who's going to start the questioning.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Hi, I'm Sharon Rogers.
And what's your current position?
I serve as Vice President and Chief Financial Officer at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
Okay, I'm going to take you back a little bit. Can you tell me where you got your undergraduate education?
Sure. I attended Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
And what did you graduate with?
Bachelor's degree is in psychology.
And then did you obtain any other schooling after that?
Yes, my master's degree is also from Indiana University.
And what did you get your master's in?
My master's degree is in information science.
Okay. And did you eventually make your way to All Children's Hospital?
I did, yes.
In what year did you start at All Children's?
In 2022.
Okay. And what do you do in your current role?
I have responsibility for our financials.
Okay. And when you say financials, what do you mean? If you could explain that a little bit more.
Sure. So I handle financial reporting, budgeting for capital and operating. I work to ensure our teams understand how the financials impact the organization. I work with our executive teams to help connect financial decision, help ensure our financial decisions are grounded in data, and produce operating statistics for the organization.
Is All Children's Hospital a charitable foundation?
We have a charitable foundation.
In terms of your filing, how is All Children's organized? Maybe if you could explain what a 501c3 is.
Yes, we are a nonprofit organization, so we are here to provide care for the community. We are here to provide care for all members of the community. Of course, we're focused around pediatrics. We provide care for anyone who needs our care, regardless of payer or ability to pay.
Let me talk to you a little bit about that. Are you generally familiar with what the payer sources are for the children that you serve?
Yes, I am. Our payer sources, many are familiar that there are multiple types of payer sources, government and non-government. We are 61% Medicaid as our payer source, 35% commercial, 1% self-pay, and 3% other.
So in terms of Medicaid, the majority of the children treated at All Children's are Medicaid funded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So when you're dealing with a Medicaid patient, are the reimbursement rates from Medicaid sufficient to pay the expenses that All Children's incurring to pay for them?
They are not. Medicaid is by far the most challenging payer. Does not cover the cost of providing care. That is pretty well known across the industry. So Medicaid covers roughly 70% or 70 cents on the dollar for the care that we provide. And given it's 61% of our payer mix, that has a significant impact on us.
So what happens if a child in need of medical care comes into All Children's with Medicaid? Do you still treat them?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
And what if there are medications that the child needs that Medicaid doesn't cover? Do you still provide them?
We provide medications. Yes.
And where do you come up with that revenue if you're losing money on that?
We, all hospitals do their best. We are very uniquely poised because we have such a high Medicaid population. So we have fairly narrow margins. We, try to very efficient with our teams using industry best practices. We do our best to be efficient and resourceful to ensure that we can provide care for all patients who are coming in need and are in need of our care.
Let me ask you a little bit about a document that was shown to the prior witness. Do you have the 990 tax return in front of you, Ms. Rogers?
I do, yes.
And I'll put it up on the screen. It's Trial Exhibit 2279H. And for your purposes, Ms. Rogers, I'm going to turn to the second page. We'll put it on the screen as well. I want it 2279H-002.
Okay. Sorry, I had not enabled Mr. Cottrell to do that, so
okay.
That was my fault. I'm sorry.
No problem. Can you enlarge that a little bit, Clay? Okay, and scroll down a little bit. There's total revenue lines. You see at line 12 the revenue for the year. Are you able to see that, the 544?
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I see it now. Yes.
Okay. And there's for the prior year and the current year. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then, for example, in the prior year of this tax return, what was the revenue?
Prior year's revenue was $544 million.
And
$192.
And what were the expenses?
Prior year's total expenses, $563 million.
So did the hospital run a shortfall on revenue in the prior year of 2020 of almost 19 million?
Yes.
And was that the year that was COVID? Is that right?
The prior year was the start of COVID.
Okay. But the hospital keeps its doors open even though they had outspent what they took in. How do you do that? Do you tap into reserves or what's the function?
Yes. So the hospital kept its doors open. We did have to tap into reserves during the early period of COVID. We continued to provide care for the community. There were a lot of expense increases, not only in the early days, but especially in the periods following COVID. Volumes dropped significantly. So there were a lot of adjustments that had to be made, not only in the beginning of COVID, but a lot of adjustments had to be made afterward as well.
Let me ask you about the line 8 contributions and grants. What is that?
That represents primarily two items, one being a Healthy Start, which is a grant that's received, but in large part, it is provider relief funds, which is our CARES Act, which is a federally provided fund that was given to many hospitals across the country to help support the period of the pandemic.
Did that CARES Act money, that 33.447 million, did that continue into this year, or is that now gone?
That is now gone.
So that was a one-time funding from the federal government during the period of COVID?
That's correct.
Let me ask you a little bit about the capital, the $19 million in capital that's spent, and you can take that down for now, Clay. What does it mean to spend money on capital improvement?
Sure. So like any large organization, you want to reinvest in the organization in order to keep up with routine maintenance, not only with routine maintenance, but you want to also be able to strategically invest. In most organizations, you want to be able to keep up with the rate of depreciation. We spent $19 million in capital this year, in the year that you're talking about. That does not keep up with the rate of depreciation. That was to handle some general routine maintenance. You want to make sure that everything from roofs to HVAC systems to elevator equipment, that you are keeping up with those things so that you don't get into problems down the line.
Okay. That money is used to ensure safety at the hospital. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Now, in terms of the jury has seen that there's about $500 million in potential investments that the hospital keeps on its balance sheets. Can you tell the jury what's that for?
Sure. So any large organization needs to have a healthy balance sheet. We are no different from needing to have a healthy balance sheet. That balance sheet and those investments are, well, one, having a healthy balance sheet is important. Creditors look at that. If we are going to borrow, they want to ensure that we are fiscally sound. Having a healthy, having access to investments allows us to continue to provide care to the community that helps us uphold our mission. So not only those routine investments, strategic capital investments, but large strategic investments are really important. Every dollar that we have really needs to go back into the community. So that available investment pool is there for that purpose.
What happens if that amount gets depleted? Meaning, does that affect your ability to borrow money or credit rating agencies? Can you explain that, please?
Yes, if that money is depleted, that affects our credit rating agency. Absolutely. It affects us in the case of an emergency. I mentioned that during the period of the pandemic, we had to access and tap into that pool because of the emergency period that we were in. We wouldn't have access to that. Also, projects that are growing and extending our care to the children of our community who need us, that money is there for them, for those strategic growth projects that would allow us to expand our care.
Do you have outreach clinics in Sarasota?
Yes.
And if you know, do those operate at a profit or a loss?
So our clinics generally operate at a loss. This is pretty consistent where clinics operate at a loss.
May we approach these lines of questions?
Approach. Ms. Rogers, I'm going to turn off.
You can unmute, Ms. Rogers.
I've got to open up the microphones again. Ms. Rogers, go ahead and unmute yourself, please. Can you hear me okay now, ma'am?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Mr. Shapiro, you may continue.
Sure. In the year, for example, 2020, 2021, did the clinics in the outreach clinics like those in Sarasota operate at a loss?
Yes.
And where does the shortfall come from? Does that come from the hospital?
Yes, it's made up by the hospital.
Okay. Let me turn back to some of the sources of revenue at the hospital that may cover that shortfall. Well, let me ask you if you know, just to cover this. Do you know what the largest source of funding is in terms of program?
Our NICU is our largest source. We care for the most critically acute or sickest children in our community, and our NICU is by far the largest program and revenue source.
And we're all familiar, at least with the acronym. That's the neonatal intensive care unit.
Yes, sir.
Is that, if you're familiar, is that where babies go when they're struggling to breathe after birth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And do you know, in terms of acuity, where All Children's ranks, at least state, local, in terms of what our All Children's acuity is versus other hospitals?
Objection, foundation,
Yes.
relevance.
Overruled.
You can answer.
We care for the sickest or the most acute babies in the state of Florida.
Okay. What about respiratory therapy? Is that another category that is one of the larger programs?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what types of services does that cover?
Respiratory therapy is helping. It is also helping ensure that our patients and children can breathe effectively, and caring for inpatients in the hospital.
Do you know what comes next in terms of the order of funding sources, programs?
Our surgical care program is a very strong program as well.
Does that include both surgery for kids? Does that include children born in the neonatal intensive care unit?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Does that include children that have been afflicted with cancer and need surgery?
Yes, it does.
And are those programs, from your knowledge in terms of strategic planning, that All Children's is looking to expand if they have the resources to do so?
Yes, absolutely.
And do children, both those who are born with cancer and those who are born with congenital anomalies down in Sarasota, do you serve that population?
Yes, we do.
And do you provide outpatient clinics to make it easier for people in the Sarasota area to access your services?
Yes, we do. It's important for us that we are providing care to our patients close to where they reside.
Let me talk to you about the concept of money being fungible. Do you know what that means?
Yes, I believe I know what you're referring to.
So let me try to break it down. Every dollar that's spent on something, you have a pool of money. You can either spend it on patient care operations or you can spend it on something else. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So just to be clear, the money that's left over at the end of the year, is it reinvested back into the organization?
Yes.
And
yes.
And the money that's reinvested back into the organization, does it go into strategic planning to help sick children in the community, including those who have cancer, those who are born with congenital anomalies? Is that true?
Yes.
And
yes, it does.
we heard, you weren't here for it, but the concept of, well, All Children's could just sell land and lease it back. Are you generally familiar of like sale leasebacks and what that entails?
I'm familiar with that concept.
That would cost All Children's money if they had to sell property and then lease it. Well, let me ask you, would it would it lead to All Children's having a negative cash flow situation relative to where you are now if you had to sell property and lease it back to yourself?
Objection, leading vague,
Ye-
ambiguous.
Overruled, she can answer.
It would, that would take funds out of our operating income if we had to pursue that option.
And when you say operating income, the number one goal of the operating income is to provide
Objection, leading.
one. Let me just ask you, what is the goal of the operating income?
Well, the goal is to ensure that we have money to be able to provide care to fulfill our mission, which includes caring for the community's most vulnerable children throughout the community. And that extends from sick children to, research, providing innovative care, ensuring access to drugs and therapies. As well as those capital, routine maintenance capital projects that I mentioned in strategic projects.
When you talk about strategic projects, as the CFO, does All Children's have the revenue right now to fund them all?
No, we don't. We have historically underspent on some of our capital needs and are assessing those now. Of course, keeping safety first, and have pursued the items that we absolutely need to. But there is a lot on the list of things that we both need and want to do that has not been pursued.
If All Children's were required to pay a punitive award in this case where the money left the hospital, would that cause you as a CFO to go to the strategic planning committee and tell them there are certain projects where you're trying to save lives in the community that now need to go on hold?
Yes, it would put a stop to those plans.
One moment, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us on.
You're giving me a good feeling.
We tell the stories that matter most.
You're giving me a good feeling. Yes, you do.
No, they don't.
I'm curious to know who writes or who you're employed by. Is it Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital or the system?
I'm employed by Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital.
Understood. I want to discuss with you and this shouldn't take long. I want to discuss with you the tax returns that are in evidence. And I want to begin with what's been marked as 2279 Hotel. Mr. Reyes, if you could please publish or share 2279 Hotel. One moment, Ms. Rogers, just dealing with the technology. By the way, Ms. Rogers, while we're waiting for that, were you scheduled to attend a deposition at 1 o'clock this afternoon?
Yes, I attended and then was told that it was put on hold.
Understood. So you and I have not had an opportunity. I'm sorry. You and I have not had an opportunity to speak before, have we?
No.
Are we close? Ms. Rogers, while we're 2279 Hotel. While we're pulling that up, Do you also have in front of you there the fiscal year 22 Form 990?
Yes.
Is there a fiscal year 23 Form 990 that's been filed yet?
'23,
Yes, ma'am.
not yet.
If I understand correctly, the fiscal year for Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital ends on June 30th each year. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so, just out of curiosity, what month is the latest fiscal year's tax return typically filed?
It is typically, you'll have to excuse me, because I will have to check. I am newer to the organization, so I don't know the typical month. I know we're finishing our audit for fiscal year 23 at the moment.
Understood. And yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. You joined Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital last year.
Beginning of last year, yes.
All right. And so you weren't around when the 2021 tax return was prepared, or the 2020, right? Ma'am?
I was in place to acknowledge it and review the 2021.
Oh, you were? All right. All right. Turning to what's in front of you, and can you see the tax return on your screen, ma'am?
Yes.
All right. If we would turn to the next page. And Mr. Reyes, if you would focus in on line 19 here. If you could zoom in on line 19, please. Do you see line 19, ma'am?
I do.
And so the $19 million loss that you discussed with Mr. Shapiro there, that was the prior year, correct?
That's correct.
And you discussed the loss at some length, but the next year, the hospital had a profit of $36 million, right?
That's correct.
And if we turned to the 2021 form, which would have been filed in 2022, just keep this here for now. The next year, you had a profit of $31 million, correct?
Yes, 30.8 million, yes.
And so that year that we saw there in the 3-year trend that we have is the outlier, the loss of $19 million, right?
You have to consider it is not, if you went back to the prior year, the year before, the one that's shown with the negative 18, you would see an even more significant loss than that listed. And you have to factor in the one-time receipts of the CARES Act, the Provider Relief Act funds that we received during this period.
For the 2 most recent years on file, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital had profits of $36 million and then $31 million. Am I correct?
Yes, we received over $60 million in provider relief funds.
So the 2 most recent years on file, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital has been profitable. Correct?
Correct, with the inclusion of the provider relief funds.
Understood. And the hospital wouldn't end up with a $600 million cash accounts and cash equivalent balance if it had been operating at a loss over its history, would it?
No, not if you look at the history in total.
All right.
If you look at the recent year's performance, the hospital has had very challenging years, which and you would see that the operating margin has been very much challenged.
So $30 million profit and $35 million profit, you would characterize those as challenging years?
Yes, absolutely, because the revenue that is leading to that bottom line there is a one-time, not something that's sustainable. And so, like with any of our, families or home situations, we want to be able to have income that we can depend on. And those one-time provider relief funds and CARES Act payments aren't something that we can continue to rely upon into the future. Those were temporary infusions that we received during the pandemic, which was obviously an outlier period. So those are very unique circumstances.
I'll move to strike the answer to the extent it was non-responsive.
Overruled.
Ma'am, over the history of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, it has on more years operated at a profit, leading to a $600 million cash and cash equivalents balance as of 2020, correct?
Well, to clarify, when you speak to the history, the entire history of the hospital, I can't go back to the entire history of the hospital. But when we're looking at our recent performance and decisions that we're making now based on our current operating margin, we have to look at how we're performing right now and how we performed in recent years in order to determine what decisions we're making now and what free cash flow looks like right now. And that's been challenged.
Mr. Reyes, if you could turn to this same document, what Mr. Heath referenced, which was labeled in the top corner, page 9. And I think that's page 11 or 12 in actuality. Perfect. Nope. I see that. Can you scroll forward and back a couple pages? I'm not sure. Next. Back. Why is this not matching up? I have a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
If you could display that page, please. My apologies, Ms. Rogers. All right. You recognize this as the All Children's balance sheet as reported in 2021?
Yes.
And is it accurate that after factoring in depreciation, the book value of the land, buildings, and equipment held by Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital was $400 million, just under $400 million as of 2021?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that if you look at the figure $651 million and change, that the $400 million we see reflected in terms of book value of the real estate significantly underestimates the market value of land, buildings, equipment as of 2021?
I can't speak to that.
You'd agree with me that the value before factoring in depreciation was $652 million approximately?
Your question is?
My question is, ma'am, in box 10A, before you factor in depreciation, which is a tax concept, is it not?
It is.
That the value of the buildings, equipment, and land was $652 million before depreciation.
Yes.
Have you, since you've been at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, has the hospital had the value of its real estate, including land, buildings, and equipment, appraised?
In total,
Yes.
I would have to verify I would have to verify that. I'd have to defer to our operations team.
Do you have an estimate of the,
in about every single piece of land? I'd have to validate that.
but in your role as CFO, do you have a rough estimate of the appraised value, market value of the land, buildings, and equipment currently held by Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital?
I would prefer not to provide a rough estimate.
Why is that?
I don't have a rough estimate to provide to you.
You're not familiar? All right, moving on. Line 11, publicly traded securities. It's accurate that as of 2021, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital held approximately $518 million in publicly traded securities.
That's correct.
What are the top 5 holdings of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in terms of public securities?
I'd need to validate that.
Would they be Dow stocks like we would expect, Apple, Google, Microsoft, et cetera?
No, we have complex, we have, just like any organization, we have investment portfolios that are managed. So it's not individual stocks.
Are you aware, even through your investment vehicles, what the top 5 holdings of publicly traded securities are?
No, not with individual companies.
If we look at the category of investments program related, and I see $24,265,000, what are we talking about there?
On
Line 13, ma'am.
okay, that is I apologize. Those are our board designated investment holdings.
Can you give us an example or two?
I'm not sure what you're looking for.
Oh, well, you just mentioned they were board directed investment holdings. I was wondering if you could give us what those would be in concrete terms. What does that mean? What are they?
No, I don't have the names of the funds.
And then
I don't have the names of the funds written.
Understood. And line 15, other assets of $46 million. Do you see line 15, Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Well-
And I'm sorry, 13, those are board designated funds used that's for the debt service.
Understood.
So those are for debt service.
And then $46 million on line 15, other assets. Do you see that, Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
What are we talking about there? What types of other assets?
That is lease, right of use, prepaid inventory.
Are you finished with your answer, ma'am?
Yes.
All right. And would you agree with me that as of the filing date here of June 30th, 2021, Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital held total assets of $1,163,000,000 and change?
Total assets, yes.
Nothing
As
further
reported, as reported there.
Nothing further this time. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Briefly. The, Ms. Rogers, you there?
Yes.
Okay. When Mr. Whitney was asking you about income of 36 million and 31 million, that all goes back into the hospital. It's not distributed as profit.
Objection,
correct?
meeting.
Overruled.
That's correct.
And so, in other words, if All Children's is able to operate at a profit, they take the money back and devote it back into patient care in the community. Is that right?
Yes. All of the money goes back into the hospital in order to expand programs, extend programs, compensate team members, compensate providers. All of the money stays within the hospital. Patients.
And every dollar that you don't have available, whether it goes out in a punitive damages award or otherwise, is the dollar that All Children's does not have to fund patient care, including helping children struggling to breathe in a neonatal ICU, children with cancer. Is that true?
That is true. Yes.
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Whitney?
No, Your Honor.
Hold on a second, Ms. Rogers. Let me see if the jury has any questions. There's going to be a jury question, so just hang tight. Ms. Rogers, I'm going to mute your microphone.
A Mike doesn't seek problems, only opportunities. The world needs more Mikes.
Ms. Rogers, if we could go ahead and have you unmute. Are you able to hear me?
I can.
There's a series of questions. Based on what I heard Mr. Shapiro comment on about the 2020 Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital tax return, which is the only tax return this jury has been allowed to view. In 2020, you basically lost money between what you took in and then what your expenses were. Is that correct?
Between 2020, yes.
You pointed out that this was a COVID area year. Therefore, your income was not that of the non-COVID years. Is that my understanding of what I believe you were stating?
Can I restate your question to make sure I'm?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so this was a COVID era. So this was, our income was not what we were used to. That is not exactly correct. We are not a hospital that has high margins in a normal year. Because of our challenging payer mix, we are not a hospital that has a benefit of having large margins in a normal year. The COVID period made things even more challenging for us because of all of the challenges that came with the pandemic. During COVID, we received a one-time payout that hospitals across the country received to help during that period. So that number is represented in the financial statements for those COVID years.
Okay. Next question. Are you saying that Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital is forever operating in the, quote, financial red, end quote, and never makes enough money for upgrades to better your programs, surgical rooms, or even research?
Not forever, but for the past 5 years, three of those 4, actually I'm looking at 4 years, 3 of those 4 years without the provider relief funds have been negative. And the one that wasn't, it was less than 1% margin. So very narrow margins. Which means we have to tap into other sources.
A 501c3 is a nonprofit, but by no means does it mean that it cannot make money. I see just 1 year's tax balance sheet, and Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital carry balance and assets, at least in the COVID bad income year 2020, about $1.2 billion. So am I correct that nonprofit does not mean no money?
Correct. Nonprofit doesn't mean that an organization isn't allowed to have funds available. Those funds are used to be able to expand and extend the mission of the organization. And it is the intent of those funds to be able to deliver upon the mission. That's the purpose of those funds.
You mentioned that every dollar goes to pay for items and it goes back into the hospital. But Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital does have, for just the 2020 tax file, in cash, securities, and assets, about 1.2 billion saved up in various forms that Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital declared on federal taxes. So not everything goes back into the bill. Am I correct?
So the 1.2 billion that is on the balance sheet, that is not available. That includes buildings and lots of other assets that aren't accessible. It includes many different things. There are some, there is a portion of that is for strategic investments.
Mr. Shapiro, do you have any further questions of this witness?
Yeah. Just briefly, so the cash, if you have a shortfall, then you can tap into those reserves. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And again, whether you have a profit of, 1 million or 33 million, or if it's a good year and it's a little higher, when you think of profit, all of that money goes back into saving children's lives in this community. Is that true?
Yes. It all goes to advance our mission.
Mr. Whitney, anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Do the jurors have more questions? And Ms. Rogers, if you can unmute your microphone. Members of the jury, I'm not going to be able to ask that last question. Mr. Shapiro, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Whitney, anything further? Okay, Ms. Rogers, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, members of the jury, what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10 to 15 minute break. I'm going to ask the court deputies to take your dinner order at this time. So it's going to take us a little bit longer for this break. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information. We'll call you back in 10 to 15 minutes.
All right. Please exit.
Seat, is there anything we need to address before we take our 10-minute break?
The only thing I want to bring to your attention, Your Honor, is it occurred to me, in this unusual situation, I need to move for a directed verdict on specific intent. I would, if had it been pled and proved in the front end, I would have moved for it at the end of their case and at the end of all the evidence. But before this goes to the jury, I think I need to make the argument because they've never proved the evidence required for specific intent on any of these claims.
Okay, what I'll do is I'll take it under advisement. I'm going to allow it to go to the jury, but I will keep it under advisement. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, 10-minute break.
All rise, court is recess.
That's it. Slow on my latest amendment, but
What's that?
Has Mr. Altenburn seen this?
I have no idea what's on that.
Yeah. I object to the question. Or the instruction. Yeah.
Goes to Maya Kowalski. She can do whatever with it she wants to. That's the law.
yeah, but the problem with it.
So, but
So
Mr.
if
Shapiro is,
says it goes to her and she can do whatever she wants with it.
so the question is, Mr. Shapiro wanted to object to the instruction, and
Yes, we object to it.
court's going to agree with the defense, and I will not give that instruction, or let me just say not give it.
Judge, we're going to, we've taken a quick glance at what's been sent us, and we've reviewed the situation in which we are, and discussed it in as much detail as time will permit. So we are going to rest at this point under the circumstances.
So you're not going to call the,
Correct.
That person's no longer in my Zoom queue, so
She was
told.
She was very well.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
She's left.
Now, you looked at those extra video clips. Did you want
We
to?
can't edit those things in time to do any good with them, Judge. And it would take time to get that done. Time that we believe would be prejudicial to us to do at this point. And the time situation and the situation in which we find ourselves in that regard is part of it, is the major force behind this decision. If it weren't this hour, if it weren't this situation, we might feel differently. But editing the clips in the way we want to do them would take upwards of 30 to 45 minutes, from what I can tell at least. And we're just not in a position to do that with where we are on this evening in this situation.
Well, I'm giving you the opportunity to edit the clips if you wish to edit the clips. So that's going to be your decision whether you want to do that or not.
I understand, Judge. What I'm telling you is we're all watching the same jury. We're all watching the same reactions. And I think you understand what I'm saying.
So if the defense is going to rest, is that going to end our evidence?
No, Judge, we're resting too. We can on to close.
Okay, so that ends our evidence.
Yes.
Both Mr. Anderson and I anticipate brief closings.
Now, then before we bring the jury back, and this goes to Mr. Altenburn and Mr. Elegant, have you reviewed the jury instructions in the verdict form? And again, I am saying that I understand the defense is objecting to the specific intent instructions and do not want them. And I have overruled that. So
And you reserved ruling on my directed verdict motions. And so the question is, are these consistent with your rulings? And I see nothing that needs to be changed that would make these inconsistent with your rulings.
you said it much more eloquently than I could, Mr. Altenburn. Thank you. Mr. Elegant, anything relative to the jury instructions?
No, there were a couple negatives in there, but they look good to me, Your Honor. I think that you've done what you said you were going to do, and that works.
Now, is the plan that I'm going to read the jury instructions and go over the verdict form and then closing arguments? Is that the plan?
Yes, either way, Judge. I'm used to it either way, so whatever the court's preference.
And I think I've given you all the paper verdict forms. I just had an extra one. let me hand one of these instructions to the court reporter. And Madam Court Reporter, do you need a copy of the verdict form as well? So this will go to the jury. Okay, let's go get the jury and bring them in. Be seated, everyone. Members of the jury, I want to confirm while you're away, you did not discuss this case amongst yourselves. You did no investigation and received no information. Is that correct? And no one approached you about this case. Is that correct? And you did not see any media accounts of this case. Is that correct? Okay. Defense, do you have any more witnesses you'd like to call? Any more witnesses from the plaintiffs? Members of the jury, I'm going to have the court deputy hand each of you a copy of the jury instructions for phase 2. And didn't either Mr. Reyes or Mr. Cottrell get a copy of them so they can publish them, or are we just going to not? I know we sent them to the team. I just don't know if they got them to you. I'm sorry? There we go. Someone has. Thank you. Whoever has it. Mr. Cottrell, thank you very much, sir. Okay, members of the jury, you can listen to me or read along and listen to me at the same time, whichever you'd like to do. Members of the jury, I am now going to tell you about the rules of law that apply when you determine whether punitive damages should be assessed, and if so, in what amount. When I finish with these instructions, the parties, well, I apologize, I should have read this earlier. You will consider the additional evidence along with the evidence presented, and you should decide any disputed factual issues by either the greater weight of the evidence or by clear and convincing evidence as specified on the verdict form. Greater weight of the evidence means the more persuasive and convincing force and effect of the entire evidence in the case. Clear and convincing evidence differs from the greater weight of the evidence in that it is more compelling and persuasive. Clear and convincing evidence is evidence that is precise, explicit, lacking in confusion, and of such weight that it produces a firm belief or conviction without hesitation about the matter in issue. You are to decide the amount of punitive damages, if any, to be assessed as punishment against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital and as a deterrent to others. This amount would be in addition to the compensatory damages you have previously awarded. In making this determination, you should consider the following. A, the nature, extent, and degree of misconduct and the related circumstances, including the following. 1, whether the wrongful conduct was motivated solely by unreasonable financial gain. 2, whether the unreasonably dangerous nature of the conduct, together with the high likelihood of injury resulting from the conduct, was actually known by the managing agent, director, officer, or other person responsible for making policy decisions on behalf of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. 3, whether at the time of the loss, injury, or damage to Maya Kowalski, the managing agent, director, officer, or other person responsible for making policy decisions on behalf of Johns Hopkins Hospital had a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski, and whether the conduct of a managing agent, director, officer, or other person responsible for making policy decisions on behalf of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital did in fact harm Maya Kowalski. And B, the financial resources of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. However, you may not award an amount that would financially destroy Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. You may, in your discretion, decline to assess punitive damages. Now that you have heard and received all the evidence on the issue of punitive damages, You have now heard and received all the evidence on the issue of punitive damages. Your verdict on the issues raised by the punitive damages claim of Maya Kowalski against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital must be based on the evidence that has been received during the trial of the first phase of this case and on the evidence that has been received in these proceedings and the law on which I have instructed you. In reaching your verdict, you are not to be swayed from the performance of your duty by prejudice or sympathy for or against any party. Your verdict must be unanimous. That is, your verdict must be agreed to by each of you. You will be given a form of verdict, which I will now read to you. And Mr. Cottrell, do you have those that you can, the verdict form? Okay. We, the jury, return the following verdict in regard to the punitive damages. For claim 1A, false imprisonment between October 7 and October 13, 2016, Maya Kowalski. Question 1. What is the total amount of punitive damages, if any, which you find by the greater weight of the evidence should be assessed against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski occurring between October 7 and October 13, 2016? Now, the form tells you what to do. If you elect to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, please write the amount on the line immediately below and then answer question 2. If you elect not to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, you should enter a 0 as the amount of damages, skip questions 2 and 3, and answer question 4. And there's the line if you elect to assess punitive damages. Question 2. Do you find by clear and convincing evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski between October 7th and October 13th, 2016, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski? And did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, in fact, harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that either yes or no. The form tells you what to do next. If your answer to question 2 is yes, you will skip question 3 and then proceed to question 4. If your answer to question 2 is no, you will answer question 3. Question 3. Do you find by the greater weight of the evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski between October 7 and October 13, 2016, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski? And did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, in fact, harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that either yes or no. The form tells you to go to question 4. This is claim 1B, false imprisonment between October 18th and October 20th, 2016 for Maya Kowalski. Question 4. What is the total amount of punitive damages, if any, which you find by the greater weight of the evidence should be assessed against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski occurring between October 18th and October 20th, 2016? The form tells you what to do next. If you elect to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, please write the amount on the line immediately below and then answer question 5. If you elect not to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, you should enter a 0 as the amount of damages. You will skip questions 5 and 6, and you will answer question 7. Question 5. Do you find by clear and convincing evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski between October 18th and October 20th, 2016, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski? And did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, in fact, harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that either yes or no. The form tells you what to do next. If your answer to question 5 is yes, you will skip question 6 and go to and answer question 7. If your answer to question 5 is no, please answer question 6. 6. Do you find by the greater weight of the evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment of Maya Kowalski between October 18th and October 20th, 2016, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski, and did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in fact harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that either yes or no. Please answer question 7. Now, question 7 deals with claim 1C and claim 2 combined. That's the false imprisonment and battery on January 6, 2017. So they will be handled together. Question 7. What is the amount of punitive damages, if any, which you find by the greater weight of the evidence should be assessed against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for the false imprisonment and battery of Maya Kowalski occurring on January 6, 2017? The form tells you what to do next. If you elect to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, please write the amount on the line immediately below and answer question 7. If you elect not to assess punitive damages against Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital for this claim, you should enter a 0 as the amount of damages, skip questions 8 and 9. The verdict form in that case would be complete. The foreperson must sign and date the verdict form on page 7. Question 8. Do you find by clear and convincing evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment and battery of Maya Kowalski occurring on January 6, 2017, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski, and did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in fact harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that either yes or no, and the form tells you what to do. If your answer to question 8 is yes, you will skip question 9 and your verdict is complete. The foreperson must sign and date the verdict form. If your answer to question 8 is no, please answer question 9. Do you find by the greater weight of the evidence that at the time of the false imprisonment and battery of Maya Kowalski occurring on January 6, 2017, did Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital have a specific intent to harm Maya Kowalski, and did the conduct of Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital in fact harm Maya Kowalski? You will answer that as yes or no. The verdict form is now complete. The foreperson must date and sign the verdict form. Okay. Now we are going to proceed into closing arguments. Again, each side has the same amount of time. The plaintiff will be able to reserve a few minutes of that time to proceed after the defense has finished its arguments. Who's going to make the argument on behalf of plaintiff? And are you seeking to reserve any time for rebuttal?
I'm going to take 4 minutes and then 1 minute.
Okay. There you go.
You're tired and you get it. The problem is they don't. I thought they were going to get up here and explain how much money they had expended in order to correct the cultural problems and all of the internal issues that led to what happened here. But they didn't come up and tell you that. And I got a little upset, I have to tell you, when they started talking about all the lives they were going to save. And I kept thinking to myself, where were the efforts to save Beata? So let's cut to the chase here. This is a company in immediate jeopardy. you have access to all of the prior evidence. You don't just take what's in here. You can take all the evidence that you had before, which is why I was mentioning the email chains to indicate the direct line up from Jackie Crane, who's number 2 in this place, right up there next to the CEO, across to risk management and straight down to Kathy Beatty, who is the implementer of all that. That's about as specific of an intent as you can because it's directed to Maya. So now, how do you do it? Well, there's a number of questions again about specific intent as to each one of these. You all talk and consider the evidence there. One other thing as to specific intent, consider the aftermath and the entire ketamine girl exchanges. Just think about that when you're discussing.
This is not punitive damage argument, Your Honor. It's also-
Overruled.
Now, there's $600,000.
I also object because it doesn't go
I'm
to
sorry,
false.
600 million.
Hold on a
I'm
second.
sorry. It doesn't go to false imprisonment or battery.
I will actually sustain that the claims for punitive damages are in battery and false imprisonment as to Maya Kowalski and not as to anything having to do with wrongful death as it relates to Beata Kowalski.
I understand. I understand. That
Okay,
was
so-
my
so-
intent with that one.
The jury is going to disregard the argument with respect to Beata Kowalski.
So here's what, you've got 600 million in cash and cash equivalents, and then you've got 1.2 billion in the total assets. So my suggestion is this, there's 3 questions there, 3 different incidents, one's combined. And you can assign percentages, but I suggest again that you come up with a total number and then go back and for your incidents, then based on what you think in terms of egregiousness,
Yeah,
you assign a percentage.
I object to the lump sum calculation being divided by a percentage as improper.
If I could get it out, I can explain it, Judge.
Can sustain the objection.
Excuse me. So what you have is you can then take either 600 million or the 1.2 billion and decide what percentage of that spread among the
Same
amount.
objection, Your
decide
Honor.
for each one. That's the
Sustained.
only way to do it.
Sustained.
I think you understand what I mean. So the numbers are 600 million or 1.2 billion.
Same objection.
Deciding out of that.
Also, I object because those numbers would bankrupt the hospital, which is what.
Speaking objection is not.
I agree with no speaking objections. I'm overruling the objection and you can have your own argument when Mr. Anderson's complete. And it appears he's complete for now.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I know it's late, so we'll try to get to the point with y'all, I promise. Again, these damages are to punish and deter, and if your anger is at Kathy Beatty, she's not there. I think you heard from Mr. Corcoran, and I'll just be brief on this, that whatever the emergency problem was in 2019 was immediately corrected. He was complimentary of the hospital getting it on the right ship after that. That's undisputed testimony from Mr. Corcoran that the corrective action plans were made immediately. So there's nothing to punish and deter from what happened in 2016. I just want to talk to you about a couple of quick concepts. Some of these findings, in fact, most of them require a specific intent to harm. And I would just ask you to go back to some of the evidence you heard for 9 weeks. Was there really a specific intent to harm Maya when they were asking the family to stay at the hospital? I know you disagreed with it. I get it. Okay. You wouldn't have checked the box saying there was false imprisonment if you thought that all children's, for whatever conduct it was, wanted them to stay, put pressure on them to stay, whatever it was you found, and I don't have a chance to interview individually. But I would just ask you to go back and put yourself, well, I would ask you to go back and consider the evidence of healthcare providers that were presented with a situation where they were told that Maya Kowalski was given an amount of ketamine that was 200 times what their protocol was, that they saw her in withdrawal, that Beata Kowalski was asking for intrathecal clonidine pumps that Dr. Santana told you could be lethal, that they were asking for ketamine comas that are legal in the United States. It caused them alarm. It caused them alarm. There was never an intent to harm Maya Kowalski. There was never an intent in that week period They were trying to do what they thought they could do to protect Maya. I know you disagree with it, but I'm really hoping in your hearts, you don't think they were trying to harm this child in that week. The reason why they wanted her to stay was because they thought they could help her and thought they could get her on the right course. I would ask that since your verdict in this is going to be, it's to punish and deter, is that the effect that you want of healthcare providers who've dedicated their lives to medicine to be muzzled, where they are afraid that a child could go to imminent harm or death? Do you want with your verdict what's coming next to be telling these healthcare providers at the hospital, don't say anything? Because
Objection, Your Honor. Crossed over to 39.
I'm sorry?
Crossed over to 39.
I sustain that.
Move to strike.
Members of the jury, you're going to disregard the comment about the reporting. The punitive damages are on battery and false imprisonment. That has nothing to do with any sort of dependency court issue.
my point, Your Honor, was not for the call, but for the week where the All Children's was telling the family, we want you to stay, for that week before.
You can make your argument to the jury.
Yes, and for these damages, where you have to find a specific intent to harm, ask yourselves in your heart, do you really believe that these providers who've dedicated their lives to medicine were trying to harm Maya, or do you believe that they were in fear that something bad was going to happen to her? And I would ask you the same with the EEG room and the other categories, because you do have to find that they were literally, not just one of them, but an entire hospital of people who've dedicated their lives to caring for sick children would somehow turn on this child. I don't think you believe that in your heart. You do not have to award punitive damages. You know that this form gives you an out to say it's enough. I would remind you that you've awarded $238 million, almost $250 million to the Kowalski family. They are asking you, and $57 million for these categories when I added it up. They're asking you for more. You've heard from Sharon Rogers. It's all going to patient care in your community. It's not a joke, right? And if I'm a little bit cracked up in front of you, because I know every additional dollar that goes out the window, as additional, this isn't insurance. These are real dollars that the hospital is going to have to take from its strategic plan that they have to help children that can't breathe when they're born, that don't have access to cardiac surgery, don't have access to neonatal surgery, don't have access to cure cancer. I would just ask you, your hearts, to think, is this really necessary at this point to continue to punish All Children's Hospital? I would ask you to look at the amounts, and I would ask you to ask yourself whether that message is one that you want to continue to send to pediatric providers that have dedicated their lives to medicine, and with a hospital that has corrected errors, undisputed testimony. Let them go forward with their mission to help the sick. Please. Please.
Mr. Anderson.
One thing I think the American people understand is that this size companies always have an argument why they need more money. And I can't believe they're still going after what Beata Kowalski decided to do. They still just don't get it.
Object, yeah. Withdraw the objection.
Okay. Are you finished with?
I'll say it again, help them get it.
Do the lawyers wish to examine the evidence before it goes back to the jury room?
Not from the plaintiffs.
No, you're.
Okay. So in a moment, the clerk is going to deposit, and you can go ahead and take both the phase one evidence plus the new phase two evidence back to the jury room. Here is the verdict form. Jury, you're going to be back in charge of timing, and it's going to be totally up to you for the length of time you wish to deliberate. At some point, if you're deliberating late to the night, I might call it and say you're going to come back on Monday. Okay. But you have the option at your own discretion if you want to keep going, or if you want to, at some point, just say you all want to go home. So that is going to be up to you within some sort of reasonable hour. Okay. Yes, you can go ahead and take your notes back with you. Yes, you can take the jury instructions with you. The clerk is bringing in the evidence. At this point, may this jury begin to retire or to deliberate.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Okay, at this time, you can retire and begin your deliberations.
All right.
Our presence, are there other issues that we need to address before we depart and wait for the call of the jury?
Not from the defense room.
And everybody knows we're going to go ahead and reclose the courtroom. So we're going to be in recess at this time, and we will be at the call. Please don't go too far. The clerk has your telephone number, but let's try not to go too far. Okay, we're in recess.